Good evening and welcome to tonight's Bible study or study in the Word tonight. Glad you are with us, and I hope you will stay around to the end of our lesson tonight. Just give me a shout out who's on. Tiffany Harris. All right, Tiffany. Glad that you are on tonight. Um, those others may be watching on YouTube or any of the other channels tonight. So just shoot me a shout out wherever you are. We're going to get right into the lesson tonight. The lesson tonight will come from a training that I took. A training that I took, and the training dealt with how to help someone who is grieving. And we are experiencing a lot of grief during this time due to COVID, due to just natural griefs of death and loss of jobs and loss of incomes and loss of family and just loss. And so it was compelled upon me to talk about how to help someone who is grieving. And what I want to really emphasize is sometimes we think that we are really helping someone when we're actually causing more harm than good. And so this training that I took, which was very helpful to me, I want to pass this training on to you. And then I hope as we finish this lesson tonight that you will share this video with someone that will help them to help somebody that is grieving. All right. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about how to help someone who is grieving. It's not easy in our society to grieve. However, if we grieve in a healthy way, we can grow, mature, and become better by going through the process of grieving in a healthy manner. If you're going to help someone through the grief process, the first thing you want to know and need to know that grief is a process and not a state. It is a process, which means it takes time to go through this grieving process. When you're helping someone process and cope with their grief, one of the worst things you can do is rush them through the process. It's their process, is not your process. And because we handle things differently, you can't assume that everybody is like you when it comes to grief. Grief. So grief is a process. It's not a state. It's a process. Nobody likes to talk about it. Nobody likes to even talk about death or losses. The most extreme type of loss and grief is the loss of a loved one or someone in whom we've had a significant relationship. Those are some of the most devastating losses that one can come across, because especially if it's a meaningful relationship, you have memories and you have things that connects you, and things that connects you and keep you connected and tied to the grief. So tonight, I want to talk to you, and I want you to do what you need to do, take some notes, whatever. But I want to help you help someone who is going through the grieving process. This is a ministry within itself. So if you can learn what I'm teaching tonight, it gives you a ministry in which the world needs. We need some people who know how to help people through the grieving process. So the most significant type of grief is the loss of a loved one. But there are other kinds of losses and grief as well. The loss of a relationship through divorce or separation, the loss of a job or the loss of income, the loss of a lifestyle is devastating. And when you go through those losses, the same process is similar, whether you are going through the loss of a loved one or going through the loss of a job or a relationship. The process is similar. It is very similar. So I want to talk about how to help someone that is going through the grief process. So you need to know that one of the worst things that we can do is, and I know people mean well, but when someone is grieving, I have heard people say, well, there are people that are worse off than you. That's insensitive. That there is no consolation in hearing somebody say that someone else is worse off than you are. Hurt is hurt. Pain is pain. And to each person, the loss is unique. Let me say that again. To each person, the loss is unique. So therefore, for you to compare somebody else's losses with the loss of the grieving person, it's really unfair. It's really disrespectful. It's really doing more harm than good. It's really doing more harm than good. So if you are hurting, it does little to hear about how someone else is hurting. It doesn't bring any consolation. It doesn't bring anyone else or the grieving person happiness just to say, hey, there's someone else that's grieving worse than you. Well, that's neither here or there. But that's not giving any type of consolation. So words mean things. Words, and whoever says stick and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. They lied, because you can heal from sticks and stones, but words have a way of staying with you. You could go 10, 20, 30 years, and those same words which was spoken to you is still causing you pain. So we must, if we're going to help someone through the grief process, we must be sensitive about our wording. We must be sensitive about our wording. The type of grief or the degree of grief depends on the attachment to the person lost. In other words, with someone who has no relationship with someone, you will see it differently versus someone that has spent time with them, that has spent years with them. If you don't know a person, it's easier for you to say it's going to be all right and just, time heals all pain and all of that, because you don't really know that person. You don't have an attachment to that person. And to say that to a person that have spent years with that person, or have spent time with that person, or have watched them go through a loss, a losing of their vitality, their life, their livelihood, their even their mental faculties. To say that to someone that you have that has gone through those things is really insensitive. It's really, really insensitive. So what we have to do is we have to learn that just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean everybody feels the same way. So you've got to learn to meet people at the point of where they're grieving, not at the point where you think they should be in their grieving, but you have to meet them where they are in their grieving process. All right, so let's move on. The next thing I want to talk about is things not to say to a grieving person. Things not to say to a grieving person. That's what I want to talk about right now. Things not to say to a grieving person. Don't say, maybe it was for the best. To a grieving person, that's not helpful to hear. That losing a loved one, losing a job, or losing, let's talk about loved ones because people are losing loved ones. Losing a loved one is not best for them. And sometimes we get caught up in these cliches that we become so insensitive to what people are going through. So if you're going to help someone in the grieving process, what you have to do is don't say, maybe it was for the best. No. Even if you've experienced a loss in the past, you don't know another person's experience. So this statement of maybe it was for the best complicates their healing process. Let me say that again. When you say to a grieving person, maybe it was for the best, it complicates their healing process. Because how can me losing the love of my life, how can me losing a friend, how can me losing a brother, how can me losing a sister, how can me losing a child be for the best? So stay away from cliches. If you're going to help somebody through the grief process, stay away from the traditional cliches because they do more harm than good. Instead, try asking, how can I help? This communicates that you care. How can I help you through this process? It indicates and it communicates to the person that you care. And it does not indicate to the person that you're assuming that you know what's best for them in their situation. So if you're going to help them, don't say maybe it's for the best. It complicates the healing process. Instead, ask, how can I help? That shows that you care and that you're not assuming that you know what's best for them in their situation. Another thing not to say to a grieving person, or not, let's do this. Another thing not to do when a person suffers a loss or is grieving. I have seen this over and over and over and over again, and it hits me the wrong way. Do not post any comment or put anything on social media without the permission of the family or the funeral director. We do more harm than good trying to be the first one to put something on social media. I'm going to say that again, because I have seen insensitive people put things on social media and the family has no idea what has happened. Somebody gets in a hurry, find out some information of somebody passing, and boom, they go right on social media. No, don't do that. It's not your place to post it on social media, and it's not directly involving you. It's not your place. It's the family's place, or it's the funeral director's place to post those things. We do more harm than good posting things on social media on grieving people that's going through hurt. We do more harm than good. Stop all of that. People are hurting. People are grieving. Quit trying to get your likes on and your heart on other people's pain. I'm going to say that again. Somebody might not like that, but I'm going to say, quit trying to get approval and to get likes and a heart on somebody else's pain. You're not helping the family. You're not helping the people that has to go through the grief process. It's not your place to post things on social media of who died. It's the families and the funeral director's place. Maybe you've never heard this before, but I'm going to share with you, don't do that. Don't do that. They have enough to go through. They have enough to deal with. They have enough to try to think about than for you to post something on social media about somebody's death or grief or loss. So that's the worst thing you could do. Next thing not to do or not to say is, I know how you feel. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Lord help me. Lord help me. Help me. Help me. Help me. Help me. Help me. Lord help me. Do not say to a grieving person, I know how you feel. The truth of the matter is, you have no idea how they feel. Even if you've had a similar loss, you cannot possibly know how that particular person feels at that particular moment. The loss can seem similar, but the relationship with the person makes each loss unique and very personal. So no, you don't know how they feel. And you're being insensitive when you say, I know how you feel. You don't. So instead, now let me help you. Instead of saying, I know how you feel, say this instead. Say, I'm here for you. I'm here for you. And I'm here to offer anything that you need. I'm here for you. If you just want me to listen, I'm here for you. If you just want me to be here, I'm here for you. That goes a long way with someone that is grieving, just to be there. And being there doesn't always mean you got to say something. Sometimes people can heal in silence. Let me say that again. Let me say this. Sometimes you don't always have to say anything when a person is grieving. Sometimes we talk too much. They can't process they can't process the pain. They can't process what's really going on because you talking too much. I hope this is helping somebody, to help somebody, how to help somebody who is grieving. Sometimes They just need a hug. Sometimes they just need you to be quiet. Sometimes they just need you to listen. Sometimes they just need you to be there and don't say nothing while they work through their process. Again, it's their process and not yours. I'm going to say that throughout this teaching. It's their process and not yours. So don't say, I know how you feel. That's insensitive. Here's another thing that you shouldn't say to a grieving person. Your loved one wouldn't want you to cry. Lord, help me. Help me, help me, help me, help me. Your loved one wouldn't want you to cry. Never say that to a grieving person. This statement creates a sense of guilt in a grieving person for sharing their true emotions. Let me say that again. When you tell somebody your loved ones wouldn't want you to cry, you're now heaping upon the pain that they're already going through, upon the shock that they're already going through the denial that they're going through the anger that they're going through. Now you have put guilt upon them. You're making them feel guilty for showing some true emotions, some natural true emotions. Feeling sad, feeling scared, feeling lonely is a normal reaction to loss. Crying does not imply that the person is weak. Let me say that again. Crying is not a sign that a person is weak or that they're doing something wrong. When you tell a person your loved one would not want you to cry, it puts guilt on them and it puts a feeling that they're doing something wrong that is actually something natural. Man, I hope y'all getting this. So you don't want to put guilt upon them by saying your loved one wouldn't want you to cry. Crying is a natural emotion to a loss, especially a loss of a loved one. So instead, what you should do is ask permission. Listen to this. You need to ask permission to give a person who is crying a hug. Don't just go and trying to hug. They may not be ready for that. They may not be ready for that. That may be how you would want somebody to do when you're going through, but never assume that the other person wants to be hugged without asking their permission. Because without asking permission, you're invading their personal space without their permission. Let me say that again. You're invading their personal space without their permission. So even when a person is crying, watch this now, even when a person is crying, you need to get permission from them to hug them. You need to ask them, what's this now? You need to ask them, do they want a tissue? Because some people need the tears to just flow. And when you hand them a tissue, you're saying to them, stop crying. Let me say that again. You need to get permission from people to hug them and even get them a tissue. Because the tissue says dry the tears up. The tissue says wipe your tears away. The tissue says move on. The tissue is a symbol to say wipe it all away. And they can't wipe it all away. They must deal with it. And some people need the tears to flow, because when the tears flow, it cleanses the soul. Oh my God. When the tears are falling and flowing, it's cleansing the soul. So some people need to listen. If the mascara run, if they don't care about it, why should you? If they don't care how they're looking, why should you? I know we're trying to be helpful, but sometimes it sends the wrong message, and people cannot properly heal when they constantly got somebody telling them dry it up. Always putting a handkerchief or a napkin or a tissue in their face. So you need to get permission to hug a grieving person, or even get them a tissue. Would you like a tissue? And if they say yes, then it's fine. If they say no, leave it alone. It means they want to process this grief. They want to process it. They want to, it's a part of their healing. Crying is very therapeutic. Crying is good for your emotions. There are people that can't cry, that wish they could cry. Crying is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength, that you have the emotional capacity to cry. Yeah. So don't say to a grieving person, your loved one wouldn't want you to cry. That's the wrong message to send. Another thing, that you shouldn't say to a grieving person is, after a while, you should not say, just move on. Just move on. This statement, just moves on, creates a falsehood that there is a certain pace for grieving. Everyone grieves in their own time and at their own pace. Let me say that again. Everyone grieves in their own time at their own pace. There are some who feel that grief should only last 1 year, and this is not true. After a year, you should be done with your grief. No, that's the wrong message to send. Instead, you need to reassure your loved one that grief is natural and that it takes time and it varies from person to person. So take the time that you need to grieve. Take the time to go through the grieving process. And don't try to rush them through that process. I hope I'm helping somebody tonight. Now, I've got a few more minutes that I want to share with you tonight. Now, there are four grief processes that I want to talk about. There are four grief processes. There's actually 6 stages of grief, but I want to talk about 3 grief processes. 4 grief processes. The first process of grief is numbness. It's numbness. This grief process is also based upon a book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and on grief and bereavement. So the first process is numbness. This is where the emotions are frozen. Some call it shock. Shock. When you first hear about someone that has lost someone, the first thing you need to know about that person is they're going to be in shock. They're going to be even in denial. They're going to be numb. Their feelings are going to be frozen. So sometimes you may get a look, or you may not get a response, because during this part of their process, there is disbelief. They can't believe what's happening, and they're feeling numb as if things are unreal. You need to know that. Don't put your feelings on them. Let them come through their feelings on their own. Don't tell them how they should feel. So the first process of grief is numbness. According to Colin Murray Parks in the book Bereavement. Colin Murray Parks in the book Bereavement suggests these 4 phases. Numbness, emotions are frozen. Second one is pining. Pining is a desire to bring the lost back, the lost loved one back. That's pining. That desire to bring the lost loved one back. The third phase is depression. And in this depression is preoccupation with the loss. So all that person is thinking about is the loss. All a person is thinking about is the loss. And the person becomes preoccupied with the loss. And that is completely normal. If you're going to help somebody through grief, you've got to know that preoccupation with the loss is normal. And you have to allow that person to be able to go through that process. So you got numbness. Emotions are frozen. You've got pining, a desire to bring the loved one back. The third one is depression, or the preoccupation with the loss. And then the fourth is recovery, which is a development of a new reality or a renewed identity. So you got numbness, you've got pining, you've got depression, and you've got recovery. Again, let me go through it just quickly so that you get it. I'm not bringing them up on the screen because I want to talk through this. Numbness is when the emotions are frozen. Pining is when there's a desire to bring the lost loved one back. The third phase of the grief is depression. That's the preoccupation with the loss. And then the fourth is recovery, development of a new reality or a new identity after a loss. You need to know that if you're going to help someone through the grief process. Now, according to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross research on the process, on the grief process, she has developed a model. I'm going to share this model with you really quickly. The model is, and I hope you can see this. Here's the model of the grief and loss curve. The grief and loss curve. To the left, you have what is called shock. It starts off with shock. And shock, again, is that disbelief at what happened. The feeling numb as if things are unreal. As a person that is trying to help somebody through the grief process, you need to know that somebody is going to go through this process. The second phase that it goes down to is denial. Denial and isolation, because people have not grasped the reality that their loved one is gone. And so there is a denial. And even in denial, there is isolation where a person will withdraw from people and society. That's normal. That's normal process. As we go down into the curve, it's called bargaining. It's called bargaining. And often what comes along with bargaining is guilt. What could I have done if I only would have been there? If you had only been there. You remember Martha said that to Jesus. If you would have only been there, my brother would have not have died. That's the bargaining. What could I have done differently to bring out a different outcome? I should have been there more for them. I should have made them more of a priority. These are some of the questions during the bargaining phase. Some even bargain with God. God, if you just bring them back, I'll be a better person. God, if you just bring them back, I'll give my life to you. God, if you just bring them back, I'll do this and I'll do that. And so that's a part of the grieving process. As we go closer down to the bottom of the curve is anger. Anger is a natural process because anger is a result of the loss of something. When people experience anger, it's usually because they have lost something. And when you have lost something, watch this now, oftentimes the anger comes because you want somebody to pay for the loss. You want somebody to give you back what you've lost. You want somebody to pay for that loss. And so the anger comes. The anger comes. The anger comes about the situation. Excuse me. The anger comes, but it's natural because you have to work through those emotions. You have to get all of that stuff out. The worst thing you can do, or the worst thing you can suggest to a person going through grief, is that they hold it in. No, even if they're misbehaving, even if they're acting out, you have to encourage them to get all of that out. Because if they don't get it out, it will affect them mentally. It will affect your mind. It will affect you mentally in years to come. So in helping a person overcome grief, or helping a person through the grieving process, anger. Some people may even get angry at you, but you got to be there for them and know that this is a part of the grief process. That is not about me. It is not about me. They're not angry at me. They're angry at the loss. They've suffered a loss and they're angry. Then, as we get to the bottom of the curve, we get to depression. we get to depression. We get to depression. Now, this is where most people make a mistake when they get to depression, because from shock, denial, bargaining, and anger, it has raised your emotions to a level outside of its normal range. Let me say that again. The shock, the denial, the bargaining, the guilt, the anger has raised your emotions outside of its normal levels. So when we talk about depression here, we're not talking about being down in the dumps. We're talking about coming off of that emotional roller coaster, that emotional adrenaline. We're talking about coming off that emotional adrenaline, that kind of depression, not wanting to kill yourself depression, not wanting not to live depression, but it's the coming down off of the emotional adrenaline that shock, denial, bargaining, and anger has produced in your body. So that's the depression. And then as we go up the curve, we go to a place of acceptance. Before I get to acceptance is this. When we get in that depression, that coming down from the emotional adrenaline, most people, what happens is most people, let me say it like this, is most people, when they come off that emotional adrenaline, most people, what they do is when somebody asks them how they're doing, they say, I'm fine. I'm okay. And if you're not okay, that's not okay to do. You know why? Because it sends you right back to denial. And then you got to come back through bargaining. And then you got to come back through anger. And then then you got to come back to depression. And then when somebody asks you again, how are you doing? You say, oh, I'm fine, but you're really not. When you've done, you send your brain back to denial. I hope I'm helping somebody. You send your brain back to denial, back to bargaining and guilt, back to anger, back to depression. Somebody asks you again, how are you doing? And you're not fine. And you say, oh, I'm good. I'm blessed. I'm not stressed. Boom. You go right back to denial and you start the process all over again. And people go years going through this process, just getting stuck in the depression, getting stuck and not coming out of it. So how do you come out of it? You come out of it by saying, when people ask you how you are doing, you come out of it by saying, I have suffered a loss. I'm going through the grieving process, but I will be okay. Let me say that again. When you're in this cycle, or someone that you know in this cycle, you got to get them to understand, to be realistic with how they feel. Be realistic with how they feel and how they are feeling. So therefore, to come out of that depressive state, don't deny what you're feeling. Simply say, I've suffered a loss. I'm going through the grieving process, but I'll be okay. And what that does, it sends a positive message to your brain that will lead you up the scale, that will lead you up the other side of the curve to acceptance. Acceptance is not saying that it's okay, that the loss is okay. Acceptance is coming to the reality of the loss. That's the acceptance. I accept the reality of the loss. Not accepting that the loss is okay, or that the loss doesn't hurt, or that the loss is not significant. The acceptance is the reality of it, that I have suffered a loss and I have to accept it. It's a reality and now I've got to accept that reality. After acceptance, going up the scale is planning. How do I move on? Or getting a person. You, as if you're going to help somebody, you don't decide and you don't plan for them. They must plan for them. So when they get to a place of acceptance and they're going up that curve, you cannot suggest the planning. They must suggest the planning. They must suggest what they need to do next. They must suggest what needs to happen next for them in their life. It doesn't come from you. It must come from them. And then you get back to the top of the other side. You get to the other side of new beginnings. Of new beginnings. Of new beginnings. So that I wanted to show you that so that that will hopefully give you some insight or a guide on this process. On this process. Last thing I want to share with you that in order to help somebody with, you got to be patient through their grieving process. You have to be patient with them. They're going to have behaviors that you won't understand, but you need to be patient. They're not going to want to be active and be involved. You need to understand that. Their habits may change. You need to understand that and help them work through it in a healthy way, one process at a time. I've got probably 10 minutes left, and I want to share this in the next 10 minutes. What people need when they're grieving is support. They need support. They need you to be there. One good example of a support in the Bible is Ruth. And I challenge you to read the book of Ruth, or at least the first chapter of the book of Ruth, because Ruth was a support to Naomi when Naomi lost her husband and lost her 2 sons. And Ruth shares some insight on how we can help people through their grief process. And one of the ways that Ruth was helpful to Naomi in the grief process was she was there to support her when Naomi could not support herself. She was there to lift Naomi when Naomi could not lift herself. She was there to encourage and to listen to Naomi when Naomi needed somebody there to talk to, or just need somebody to listen. So what they really need is support. They don't need opinions. They don't need to know your philosophy or what you think or how you think. They need your support. They need you to be there. They need your support. So lastly, I'm going to give you these do's and don'ts, and I'm done. And I hope this will help you. You're going to have to probably listen to this 2 or 3 times to get it all. But I'm telling you, if you'll do this, God will use you to help bring people through the grieving process. So I'm these last do's or don'ts. Listen to what a person, listen and hear what is being said. You're there to be a support. So it means be there to listen and hear. You don't always have to talk. Be there to listen. What are you going to hear? You're going to hear the person talk about that person over and over and over again. Listen. You're going to hear them share memories. Listen. You're going to hear them share frustrations. Listen. You're going to hear them share guilt. Listen. You're going to even hear them share shame. Listen. Even if they share guilt and shame, it's not your place to say, no, no, no. They're not looking for your approval. They're just listening. They're just looking for your ear. It's their process. Even if a person says, it's my fault, or if I would have done this, that's where most people want to say, no, 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 no. What you just did is you just cut off their expression. You just cut off their ability to express themselves. So whatever they want to express, it's a feeling, it's an emotion. You have to let them express that emotion because it's healthy. They're processing. They're not processing like you would process, but they're processing their emotions and they're getting all of that stuff out of them so that it doesn't stay in them. It's got to come out. So you got to be there to listen and to hear what's being said, even if you don't like what's being said or agree with what's being said. Acknowledge that each person's experience of grief is unique. It's unique. Don't treat it all the same. It's not. It's unique. So treat the person that you're with and helping him through the grief process, treat it as unique experience and a unique experience for them. Remember, nobody has to justify their feelings to you. Nobody has to justify their feelings of how they feel to you. So don't try to get people to justify how they feel. Let them feel what they feel. Whether you agree with it, whether you like it or not, allow them to feel what they feel. Allow the person time to grieve. Realize that a person that suffered a loss, even if you don't perceive it as a loss, because again, that loss is unique to each and every one of us. Don't stifle the person's desire to talk about their loved one. Don't stifle their desire to talk about the deceased because they're going to talk about them over and over and over and over again. It's their process. Encourage the griever to express emotions and to work through the grief. Remember also that many who give support immediately after death may be delayed in working through their own grief. So, in other words, in helping someone else with their grief, you got to process your own grief before you can help somebody else. Here's the last one, and I'm gonna let you go. Don't give trite answers to the why questions. In other words, don't give cliche-ish answers to when people say why. Why? Treat it as a rhetorical question. They're not looking for answers. It's an expression. They're simply expressing themselves. So allow them to express themselves. You don't always have to try to have the answers, especially when you don't know the answer. Don't feel obligated to give an answer because you don't know the answer. So instead of trying to give an answer, encourage the person to talk about it. So why did this happen? Let's talk about how you're feeling right now. Where's that why coming from? Where's that coming from? And allow them to talk. Allow them to talk. What do you mean by that? Allow them to talk. Rephrase and reframe. I hear you expressing a pain. What is that pain that you're feeling right now? Allow them to talk. And if you will do these things, God will place opportunities all around you to help someone who is grieving. That you can be an instrument of God to help somebody who's going through the grief process. God can use you. You want to know what your purpose is? Learn what I've just taught. Putting it into action. And God will take and God will anoint you to care for the grieving and to help them deal with their loss. You don't need a special title. You don't need to pay money to do this. Just being there for people, knowing what people need, the support, knowing the do's, the don'ts in the grief process, which I've shared with you tonight. So again, I don't care how many times you have to listen to this. Understand the concept. Understand what I'm teaching. Put those things into action, and you will be a difference maker to someone you love and someone in the world. I hope this has blessed you. Please share this video with someone. Most of all, please share this video. Would you share this video? Would you share this video with somebody tonight? Also, please like, heart. If you have any questions, matter of fact, I said a lot. So if anybody have any questions, throw some questions in. If you have some questions, if not, then that's good. But if you have questions, I'm going to stay on here a little longer so that you can ask your questions. So if you have questions, please feel free to put your questions in. Any questions tonight? You may not want to put your questions on here, but you can feel free to instant message me. Instant message me. If you have a question, instant message me. And I will definitely reach out to you and give you a response to your question. I certainly hope this was helpful. Please leave a comment. I don't see any questions. Look one more time. I don't see any questions. Well, again, if you have any questions, reach out to me. I am me. I am me. Reach out to me. I am me. Reach out to me, and I will answer any question that you may have. May God bless you. Share this information with somebody. Help somebody. Help somebody that is going through this grieving process, that healing may take place. I want to pray this out. Father, in the name of Jesus, we just come right now. God, we pray for the hurting people that are hurting today, that are going through losses of a loved one, that is going through the loss of a job, that's going through the loss of a relationship, that's going through the loss of finances, that's going through a loss, oh God. You are the God of all comfort, and God, you are able to bring peace in the midst of their storm. God, I ask you that you will comfort those that have experienced loss and are going through the grieving process. God, I pray that they feel your presence, that they feel your power, that they feel your anointing, that you will bring them through on the other side. And God, we will give your name the glory, honor, and praise. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Be blessed tonight. God loves you. I love you. Leave me a comment, and we will see you next week at 6:30 for Bible study.